Good morning, students. We are continuing with our lecture on restoration literature. Hope you remember all those previous things. We talked about literature in the Caroline age. We talked about the works of John Milton in particular, and then we moved to the characteristics of metaphysical poetry, and we looked into the details of the poets, and then we dealt with cavalier poets, and then we looked into the literature of a restoration age, and we talked about their attraction towards French literary tradition. And there is a mistake in the textbook too. PowerPoint, it is Charles II, not Charles I. So I had rectified it in the original PowerPoint. So then we talked about the poetry in the age of Dryden, how it was influenced by French poetry, and how it laid foundation for neoclassical poetry, which is also known by the name, hope you remember, it is Augustan age. And we talked about the characteristics of this age. We talked about the clarity, directness and elegance of the poetry of during this age, and how poetic form. Then we looked into the details, and we looked into the works of John Dryden in particular. So we stopped there. Now we are moving to the prose during this period. It is said that restoration marks the real moment of birth of our modern English prose, as Matthew Arnold says. So when you make a comparison between the prose in the age of Milton and restoration prose, you can differences. Like prose in the age of Milton, it was too intricate, too complex, too long, and it was Latin syntax rather than on English syntax. So it was too artificial, too involved. But when you come to restoration prose, it became more simpler, shorter, and this classical style, which was with the use of this Latin syntax, was done away with, and reading and writing became more easier. And we can say there is this difference can be evident in the PowerPoint itself. There is this picture of two prose there. One is the rule and exercises of holy living by Jeremy Taylor, and the other one is an essay of dramatic poesy by John Dryden. If you go through these two prose, you will understand the basic difference, that more difficult to understand, which contain all those mighty words, but in the second one you see it as more simple. So we can say that Dryden's prose is the emblematic of restoration prose, and there are many causes behind this in the introduction and establishment of this new prose. One can be the spread of the spirit of common sense and of the critical temper of mind. So something which was suppressed during this Puritan age, it was the age of repression. From there it was a movement towards the age of self-expression, and along with that there is this extending influence of science, which actually favored clearness of thought and plainness of expression. Along with that, we must say that there was a new kind of public growing up with a kind of literary taste. So we see a new discourse in prose. There is a mistake, it is prose, P-R-S-E. There is a new discourse in prose in which we see the development of journalism, all those political party programs during this period. So, and along with that, we need to understand there was still the influence of French literature too. So all these things brought about a new kind of prose, which actually, as Matthew Arnold says, it was actually the real moment of the birth of modern English prose. Now we move to the major poet, one of the major poets It is John Bunyan. So he was a Baptist teacher and who was completely immersed in Puritan ethos. So it should be said that if Milton was the great poet of Puritanism, Bunyan was actually the great prose writer. So he was born of poor parents, and for a time he had been a tinker. Later he became a village preacher, and after a long term of imprisonment, and during this imprisonment he started writing all these works. So he is chiefly remembered for this masterpiece, Pilgrim's Progress. Along with that, he has written an autobiography which is titled Grace Abounding. So Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory about faith and salvation. It is about the journey from the city of destruction to city of salvation. So we can say that this Pilgrim's Progress owed its origin to his second imprisonment. So it is, as I said earlier, it is a Puritan allegory in which the hero, he is named Christian, he makes his pilgrimage from the city of destruction to the celestial city, which stands for heaven. So he passes through different places: mountain of error, the valley of humiliation, Vanity Fair, and he encounters many allegorical personages like worldly wise men, giant despair, and madam wanton. And he also gets the assistance of evangelist, faithful, hopeful, etc. So the book is full of allegorical characters. I hope that you understand the term allegory. So, and in the second part of the book actually describes the pilgrimage of Christiana. It is actually the Christian's wife and their children. And this book was immediate success. It is said that it was translated into more than 100 different languages. So, the most remarkable thing about this work is its language, which is singular, which is unique in its simplicity and beauty. So we see the influence of Bible in Bunyan's thought and style. So, and the realism in this work makes a forerunner of all those novels of Defoe in the next century. So this work had great influence on the next generation, even in the next generation too. And as I said earlier, this is his autobiography, Grace Abounding. So it is a religious autobiography in which he talks about how Holy Spirit descended on him and blessed him. So this is the great prose writer of the period. And now we are moving to the last part. We are talking about the Restoration drama. Restoration drama, we understand that what happened in the Puritan period. Drama had suffered a major setback during the Puritan period. We saw the closing down of all these theatres, and there was this complete ban of stage plays. And now, with the restoration of monarchy, all these things were restored, and Charles II started patronizing theatre along with literature. And these are the two distinct literary products of Restoration drama. One is comedy of manners, and the other one is heroic tragedy. And these are the characteristics of Restoration drama. There we see a great improvement in stagecraft, and we see the advent of female actors. As you know, in all these Shakespearean plays, we see there were no female actors. It was actually young boys who played the role of female characters. And we said that the traveling troupe dwindled, it decreased, and theatre started confining itself to London, and it catered to the needs of upper class. And you must remember this work. I think I haven't mentioned it in this PPT. It is the work of Jeremy Collier, which is titled "The Immorality of the English Stage." So, in which he talks about the element of obscenity in these plays, and he condemned all these restoration drama, and it actually brought a slight. It is said that it actually brought a slight improvement in the later plays. So now we come to comedy of manners or restoration comedy. So, as it is said there, it actually reflected the fashionable life. We see the scenes confining itself to drawing rooms, coffee houses, and parks. And as I said earlier, I have discussed in the earlier classes too, we talked about the moral laxity, uh, the, the moral degeneration which was evident in this age, which actually got reflected in the dramas of this period. So we see that it was notorious for their moral laxity. For example, a good example is Vaishali's country wife. So there is this one of the characters in it pretends to be impotent in order to facilitate his easy movement among ladies. So there were all these in all these plays. So we can say that the restoration, and hence the restoration comedy also was demoralized. So like a mirror, it reflected the contemporary society. So when compared to the age, the restoration period was less dramatic in genius, and comedies were more popular than tragedies. So the leading playwrights were Congreve, Vaishali, and Etheridge. So the works of William Congreve, that is Love for Love, Way of the World. These are the famous works of William Congreve, and The Way of the World. It is the best example of comedy of manners. And the other one is Vaishali. His masterpiece is The Plain Dealer. And there is this Etheridge. He was a pioneer who prepared the way for all these writers like Congreve. And look at the themes, plots of these plays. It had this complex structure, which intricate plots and subplots, all those love intrigues, and devices like eavesdropping, disguise, forging of letters were used. So it is known by the name, it is also known by the name artificial comedy. And we see the influences of continental writers, French writers like Molière and Calderon. So comic characterization comes from the influence of Calderon. And these are as I said earlier, these are the major dramatists. John Etheridge, who has written The Man of the Moon, Love in a Tub, Congreve, Way of the World. William Vaishali, The Country Wife. Richard Sheridan, he is known, it is the perfect example of comedy of manners. It is the school for scandal. So we must say that the Restoration plays were more realistic than the Elizabethan, and they actually presented the manners, the frivolities, and the love intrigues of the upper class society without any whitewashing. This comedy of manners actually invited. That is when, as I said earlier, this Jeremy Collier wrote an essay which was titled The Short View of the Profaneness and Immorality of the English Stage, in which he strongly condemned the Restoration comedy, and he talked against all those moral laxity, vulgarity in this work, in the works of during this period. So now we move to the last part, that is Restoration Tragedy. It is also known by the name heroic play. So I stress the point that you must focus more on comedy of manners, in which it talks about the manners of the upper class, the artificial life and manners of upper class. Now we move to Restoration Tragedy, which is also known by the name heroic play, and here too we see the influence of French romances and drama, especially the works of Pierre Corneille. And in here we see about love and pity and fear. That is usually the common elements we see in a tragedy, but here it is different. It used the themes of love and honor, and the mode it used was grand, rhetorical, and declamatory, and at its worst bombastic. And it used employed rhymed couplet and blank verse. It was staged in a spectacular and operatic fashion, and it was something like an escape from the world. So it took us into another world, an imaginary world. So these are the perfect examples of Restoration Tragedy. You have John Dryden's The Indian Queen, The Indian Emperor, and All for Love. And you have this work of Nathaniel Lee, it is Rival Queen, and Thomas Otway, his Venice Preserved. So we come to the end of this session, in which we discussed the last portion. Hope you understood. So if you have any doubts, please, you can message me, you can ask me questions. And now from next class onwards, we will be moving to the new portions. We are starting with Victorian age, I hope so. So if you have any doubts, so I am repeating this, if you have any doubts regarding this, please contact me. If you want the PPT separately, I think there are some mistakes in some spelling mistakes and some factual errors in this PPT. I will clear it and send it to you. Then girls, thank you, have a nice day.